But I was more interested in about, what the overall results have been since all of these things happened, since Dr. King and his marches and his speeches that he made. What's the difference? I mean, we're talking about generations after, almost 50 years now.
So what we have now, we have the mall there where his legacy is being is written out and expressed. But the reality of what he says is limited. And another part of that is the people who he was representing, the black people that he was so passionately struggling for. I don't believe they really, up to now, I was telling Lori that the other day, I don't believe the majority of us ever joined the civil rights movement, ever really became a part of it from deep down in their heart. That really became cogs in that wheel to move things along so that we would be better off today in a substantive way.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is what you mentioned at the very beginning, that a lot of people have the "I have a dream" speech, but they don't know the substance of a lot of his other speeches. And it's a travesty on the part of the media because, at the very least, maybe during Black History Month, they should release some of those archives
Right.
and allow us to see some of that, because not only do those of us who were either born or grew up during that era don't remember everything as clearly unless we have a snippet from Old Like It Is or something of that nature. But there's an entire generation that's never seen it, and none of us can really recite it to them. And even if we could, we couldn't recite it with impart it the same way that Dr. King or Malcolm X or other people who had speeches with a message could. And so I think it's very important that we try and get that information out, because what has it been 30 years since Eyes on the Prize? Yeah. That's the only show that we have that actually shows some of the important events during the civil rights era.
And one of the things that I thought was interesting about the conversation is I was following up on something I heard a guy talking about on the radio. And when people called in to address the question about King's legacy and all of that, they had made a point, well, what are you doing to move forward with his legacy? And when I thought about that, I said to myself, well, really, I think people need to kind of take a step back and look at the economic inequality, because I think that's one of the major things. It doesn't mean anything to me if I can live next door to somebody if I can't take care of myself. It doesn't mean to me if I can live next door to you for one period of time and then I lose my house because I can't pay the rent or pay the mortgage or whatever. But when we're talking about people being able to compete on the same level and be able to move forward and leave generational wealth, because when you look at what's going on in this country and what's happening right now, when you look at the income inequities between blacks and whites, and that's just not in this country. That's around the world. Okay, there is no legacy income. Me and you talked about this before, Lori, when we looked at black people starting their own businesses, and what was one of the major differences between whites and blacks was that whites had legacy income, wealth that was laid down. Where we are subsisting, we're just moving from paycheck to paycheck, and there's nothing else to help us move forward.
That's a beautiful thing to see, the job fair that they're putting on. And it's a major issue. It's number one or number two on a lot of the news programs. It's the lead story on many of these programs, and that's important. And it's important to see the Black Caucus actually speaking up and making their presence felt, even if they may be irritating Obama a little bit or whatever's going on. Speaking up is wonderful. That is what they need to do.
But it was interesting. There was a point made on one of the radio shows where they're saying it was unfortunate that a lot of people at these job fairs, a lot of the adults had to turn away young people and send them home to change their clothes because they were showing up not appropriately dressed to meet for an interview, and they had no idea and it's interesting, I was talking to a woman a few days ago, and she brought up a very interesting point, because we were always talking about moving
Right.
with the times and advances with technology and other things, and she was saying that in this day and age, things have changed so drastically that you can wear jeans to church. You remember when we were growing up, it was like your Sunday best was your Sunday best.
Right.
And she was saying that people are showing up for interviews in shorts. So it's important for us to, like we were saying earlier, to give the information that young people haven't been exposed to whether it's Dr. King's speeches or, you know, what is required of you during an interview in terms of your presentation physically and verbally, et cetera, because this is stuff that a lot of young people don't know. And in this economic time where it's very difficult to get a job to begin with, you want to start out with as many advantages as you can when you step up in front of a potential employer.
I'm glad you brought that up. Excellent point.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap this particular segment up for Black Men Screaming. We'll be back with more of it in just a moment.